And welcome to the Development Control Committee meeting today, 8th of January 2025. But before we begin the formal agenda, I would just like to draw your attention to the following items. Could I please ask that all phones are either on silent, on airplane mode, or switched off? The meeting will be live streamed or is being live streamed on YouTube. So if any member of the public attending the meeting objects to being filmed, please advise us immediately and we will ensure that they are not included in the filming. Although I stress, the public gallery will not feature in the live stream and the public speakers will only be filmed from behind where they are seated and their faces will not be visible. So could I just see if anybody is concerned about appearing on YouTube? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Members, I think I've gone past... Oh, well, too busy drinking coffee. It's okay. I'll just let you both set up. Okay, I'm not sure it's necessary to remind members, A, to be on time, or, or B, how to use the microphone system. But is anyone unclear? You just literally press and then wait until I call you to speak. Okay, right. So, thank you. And we now turn our attention to the formal agenda. So I will ask our Democratic Services Officer, Helen, to declare any absent members, please.
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Rachel Hood.
Thank you, Helen. And are there any substitutes for Councillor Rachel Hood? Councillor Patrick Chung. Patrick, press your microphone button. That's it. We can.
Councillor Chung for Councillor Hood, please.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Chung. Then we've got the minutes of the meeting of the 4th of December 2024. Are there any corrections? No. Could I have a proposer? Councillor Whittam. And the seconder, please, Councillor London. So the proposed acceptance of the minutes was by Councillor Whittam and seconded by Councillor London, unamended in any way. Could I see a show of hands in favour of the minutes, please?
Thank you. The minutes are accepted.
Thank you, Claire. Right, item 4 on the agenda is the usual declarations of interest, which I read for clarity. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable or non-registrable interest which they have in any item of business on the agenda, and that should be no later than when the item is reached and when appropriate to leave the meeting prior to discussion and voting on the item. So at this stage, are there any declarations of interest? Okay, thank you, members. In that case, we can swiftly move on to the first application, which is the Shepherd's Grove Industrial Estate, and Gary is the presenting case officer, and you may begin, Gary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This application relates to a site at Shepherd's Grove, Sumner Road in Hepworth, or Stanton. It's actually in Hepworth Parish, but it's quite close to Stanton as well. The application is for demolition of existing buildings on site and a change of use to open storage, which is use class B8, and this is for a temporary period of 3 years. It also includes some car parking, an ancillary welfare building and perimeter fencing. The application is here before you due to it's a major application, but it's on a site that's got significant local interest with local community, and there's also been previous proposals of a major scale that's been brought before committee before. And the officer recommendation, in this case of approval, is contrary to the views of Stanton Parish Council. As noted there, whilst Hepworth Parish Council don't object in principle, there is a difference of opinion in terms of the limiting of the storage height. This is the wider site location within the district. Site is outlined in red here. You've got Hepworth to the north, Walsham the Willows to the southeast, which is not in our district. It's in Mid Suffolk. You've got Ixworth to the southwest over here. Obviously, Bury Town further to the southwest here. The A14 runs along here, and the A143 is the closest road to the site, which runs along here. This is the landscape and policy context for you. I thought it'd be helpful just to point out the site and its allocation. The orange is policy RV4, which is a current allocation as a rural employment area. Although the site itself is also in an emerging local plan as well as a rural employment area, and indeed there is also a allocation for development on the Janic part of the site, which I'll come on to in a second. Of note on here as well is the areas in purple. They're special landscape areas, but they're outside our district. So hopefully that gives you sort of a context of where you are, and also in terms of landscape, you've got areas of green here which are treed areas, and the site itself is a relatively elevated position, being an older airfield. Just for context again, I wanted to highlight the previous refused Janic application that came into committee last year on 27 hectares of the site, and that's outlined in red for you here. So the site that we're discussing today is this one, and this is the area that was proposed last year, which you'll well know had a vehicle storage use proposed in this area, and the remaining areas were for commercial B1, B2 uses. There is also a current outline application to provide new employment floor space by equation, and this is outlined in red here. So this actually encompasses the site we're talking about now, but I thought it's important to note this is this is undetermined application that's in at the moment, but obviously it's important to know that because, as I noted in the report, this is linked to the current application in as much as that we have to consider whether it would prejudice the delivery of any further development on this site. So in terms of what we're discussing now, this is the site, as you can see outlined in red, which is the existing hard standing areas. This was the former runway of the airfield, or part of it, and also the former taxiways around here. Access to the site is off Sumner Road, which itself is then joined to, at this junction, to the A143, heading east and heading west. Other land owned by the applicant is outlined in blue. Of interest as well is Suffolk Mushrooms, which are located in these buildings here, and they have been for some time, as have DHL, who are located in this building here. They're, as you probably well know, their storage and distribution in this area here. And they do share this access at this point, so it's established commercial access. This is an aerial view of the site, looking south. This is the area we're talking about here, the area of hard standing running in this area. Say Suffolk Mushrooms, DHL buildings. Of note are these buildings here, which are quite significant. Looking at the planning permission, they're at least 12 metres high to the roof. Other buildings vary from between sort of 3 metres, up to that sort of 12 metre height. Just to point out, there are existing buildings on here because this was taken before a lot of the commercial uses vacated the site. So this building remains, but this has all been cleared. And as I've shown shortly, there are some buildings still to be demolished, but the majority of the site has now been cleared. This is land under the control of the applicant, and down here, moving into this area, is the adjoining Janic-owned site, obviously currently without any permission. So in terms of building demolition, this is shown for you highlighted in blue. So it's these 3 buildings here. as you can also see from this image, the majority of the site is then clear in terms of the hard standing. What's also proposed on the site is a welfare building, a relatively small scale, sort of 7 metres by 2.6 metres, and this is simply to provide, as it says here, some facilities, kitchen, drying, toilets, and that sort of thing, for the limited sort of employees that would be on the site. And in terms of location of that building, that's proposed here within the three areas of the site. You say they're all hard-standing areas, and then this area here is where the welfare building is proposed to be located, and that adjoins 6 parking spaces that are also proposed. As you'll see from the report, there's no end user confirmed at this stage, but the applicant has provided information of recent prospective occupiers, which could include this sort. So I put this on here to include what sort of use it could be on the site, and these are the sort of 5 main ones, which it says here is storage associated with Sizewell, which I'm anticipating with materials and plant equipment, that sort of thing. Self-storage has been mentioned. That's also covered in my report. I'll come on to that. Industrial open storage, again, I assume that would be sort of more plant equipment, that sort of thing. Scaffolding storage, and in this case, Mercedes-Benz vehicle storage. Again, I will come on to that later. Also proposed is the fencing, which would, as you'd anticipate, would follow the red line here on the site, and just simply is Harris fencing proposed. And this is a pair of gates which would be located at this point of the site. So the entrance to the site would be here, and then at this point it would be gated, and there's other gates in these areas as well. So these 3 areas would be accessed internally. There's only one access to the overall site, which is the existing access at that point. So I'll now move on to the looking at the landscape and the visual sort of impact of the development. These images, the top one is taken in the summer, and the bottom one is early spring. And you'll see on the images here, outlined in orange is where the view is taken from. So we're looking towards the site, towards the east here. So you can see the extent of the site roughly is this, as shown by the arrows. So from this viewpoint here, because we've gone right back, heading back towards Stanton and past the existing industrial areas here, it's very much set in amongst existing landscaping. There's quite a few intervening landscape features. So from this viewpoint, you would, depending on obviously the height of what's being stored, you'd very much only have glimpsed views of the buildings or structures on the site. Moving round to Grove Lane, that's the edge of the industrial estate, the sort of southern part of Shepherd's Grove, if you like, looking up towards the site. You can just maybe make out in this location here some existing buildings, and they're the DHL buildings which I pointed out in the distance. So again, you can see there is intervening vegetation in that location, so you're going to get, again, further glimpse views of any structures. Obviously, we're suggesting here a limit of 10 metres in terms of storage. So depending on what's on there, will then, depending on how much you'll then be able to actually view any equipment or storage items on the site. Moving around to the entrance to the site off Sumner Road, as you can see, it's an existing established commercial entrance, quite a wide bell mouth, and has been like this for many years. And this serves Suffolk Mushrooms in this direction, and then obviously would also then serve the site we're talking about now, moving around in this direction here. Moving around to the A143, this is the junction of Sumner Road with the A143. You can just see in the distance here the red brick building here. That's one of the existing buildings on the site to be demolished. And and from this viewpoint, this is where you're going to start to see quite a lot of the site. That's probably its most visible. But it is also against a backdrop of existing commercial buildings further to the south of the site. Just move slightly further round. So what's hidden behind here are the majority of those commercial buildings to the south. You've got obviously existing buildings on the part of the site as well. But it will be fairly visible from this viewpoint. I just wanted to touch on at this point to mention about traffic generation from the site. It's been well, not tricky, but obviously there's often no specific exact data for this. You take the use itself when you look at TRIX data, what they call TRIX data, and what that indicates for a storage use. It sort of looks at different ones around the country to glean indication, and here it's suggested that over a 12-hour period there could be potentially up to 400 trips, and 26 of those trips are likely at peak times. So it's quite a low level use. By way of context, the existing general employment use of the area, which is mostly historic and largely associated previously with Suffolk mushrooms, there's potential there looking at the existing buildings and the floor space for there to be up to 716 trips in a 12-hour period, and 60 trips at peak times. And again, that's based on sort of TRIX data, which is used when doing transport assessments and that sort of thing. So on that basis, and having looked at the site, Highways are satisfied there would be no material impact on the safety or operation of the local highway network. And they also point out, obviously here, as it says, that given the existing use of the junction as a means of access to the site, and the existing uses on the site, there would be no unfamiliar vehicle types being introduced onto this section of the highway. So it's not like it's a new access being created. There is already existing commercial traffic using that site. Now I'll just move on now to the summary of comments received for the application. In respect to the parish councils, Stanton Parish Council object to the application. They're concerned about the height of the buildings to be constructed, and they also suggest no information was provided the items to be stored, and the hours of operations were not clear. I've touched on the items to be stored. There is no end user defined at this stage, but I've given an indication of what could be stored on there and perhaps what is likely. And the hours of operation are touched upon in the report. And deliveries are going to be suggested to be controlled by condition, again, which is set out in my report. Hepworth Parish Council, they don't object in principle to the storage use on the site, but in this case, they feel that there should be any buildings or structures or storage units on there should be limited to 5 metres to preserve the existing character of the landscape. Walsham and Willows Parish Council also object to the application. Their objection is more to do with the principle of storage and distribution. And again, exact materials to be stored have not been specified. And it would also generate considerable on-site and off-site traffic, as it says there. And they also recommend a liaison group between the developer and local parishes should be established, and that the maximum height stored is excessive at 15 metres. That's what was originally proposed with the application, or that has been amended to 12, and officers are suggesting a limit of 10, which actually does equate to what they're suggesting in this case. Just going back to the liaison group, I believe that's a throwback to the JNIC application previously, where that was indeed proposed via condition, but officers feel in this particular case of this application that would not be justified. In terms of objections, no objections from local residents have been received. in terms of major consultee comments, County Highways raised no objection, subject to deliveries management condition, which is set out in the report. Place Services Ecology, who are our ecological consultants, they have no objection, subject to enhancements set out in the ecology survey. That's mainly to do with bats, and again, that's set out in my report. Place Services Trees, no objection to the site. There are no trees affected on it. And indeed, it's mainly hard standing anyway, so there's no issues there. Private sector housing and environmental health, they have no objection, subject to conditions dealing with noise, dust and odour, and that's through any potential uses on the site, obviously, which is not clear at this stage. And again, there's a relevant condition which is proposed, which deals with that in the papers. So in summary, the proposed use of open storage is considered to accord with the permitted uses set out within policy RV4. Just worth noting that that policy does require a master plan for any development on this site, which hasn't been, there was one that's now expired, so there is no current master plan for the wider site. However, we do feel that in this case, the use itself is one that that policy does allow for. In that case, the application does accord with that element of the policy. An open storage use for 3-year temporary period would not prejudice the delivery of the wider allocated site. And if you remember, I showed you the previous application by JNIC, obviously the overall allocation and the current application, which is in on the site for storage and distribution. And we feel due to the temporary nature of the application and the limited amount of development proposed, it's not going to prejudice the delivery of any sort of wider scheme coming forward on the site. And therefore the application accords with CS9, policy CS9, and as it says here, with minor weight to be attached, emerging local plan policies SP12 and SP12AE and LP36. That's considered in more detail in the report, but due to the current status of the application of the local plan going through the process, which is now back with the inspectors following the hearing, there were some modifications proposed to these policies, and therefore we can only attach limited weight to them at this stage. So overall, the officers would feel that the proposed use is suitable for what is an existing rural employment area and indeed an allocated employment area, and is acceptable in principle. We do note that there is limited contribution towards the economic growth of the district through the limited employment which is proposed. It suggested there could be up to 3 employees on site, certainly initially, but of course that could change over time. But notwithstanding that still is supported by the NPPF. It's in accordance with policy. There is some degree of economic growth. And as I say, they're in accordance with policy RV4, CS9 and emerging local plan policies, which overall does weigh in favour of the scheme. Also of note, Highways raised no objection to the proposal, subject to condition, and it would not have a significant impact on the local highway network. And therefore, the application accords to the NPPF and relevant policies in that regard. So noting the application would be for a limited period of 3 years, and it's impacting a relatively small area of what is a wider employment site. And as it says here, subject to the officer's opinion of a height restriction of 10 metres, impacts on the wider landscape would not be significantly adverse. And subject to that, the application is considered to accord with the relevant policies in that regard. So in conclusion, we feel that the albeit limited employment benefits arising from development outweigh any harm that's been identified for the temporary use of the site for open storage. And subject to planning conditions, which are set out in the report, the development is acceptable and in general compliance with all relevant policies and the NPPF. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out on pages 35 to 38 of the officer report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Gary. So we turn our attention now to our registered speakers. And we welcome Councillor Gary Bloomfield, who's the chairman of Hepworth Parish Council. We've got Councillor Carol Ball, who's the ward member for the site, and Adam Cornish, who is the agent for the applicant. So, Gary, you've been here before. You know the format. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Hepworth Parish Council has responded twice on this application, and although we have not objected to it, we have stated our concerns regarding the height of storage and what could be stored on the site. We believe, along with Stanton PC, that no storage should be higher than any building currently on the site, which I believe is currently no more than 5 metres. Certainly no building in areas 1 and 2, as shown on the design and access statement, are above this height. The building in area 1, that is 5 metres high, can be seen in photo D of the statement, and if you could imagine the officer's proposal of 10 metres, this could mean a wall of multicoloured containers stacked 3 high in full view from the A143. We do not believe this is acceptable, as this would be about 100 metres from some current residential properties, and also would significantly affect the rural aspect of the site. The landscape assessment understates the visual prominence of parts of the site from the A143, especially at winter. The reference from the officers in paragraph 97 stating existing buildings at the DHL site range from 3 metres to 12 metres is slightly misleading, as these are only adjacent to area 3 and not areas 1 and 2 that are close to the local residents. Hepworth PC are still unclear regarding paragraph 2 of the proposal and condition 1 of the officer's recommendations regarding the permission for 2 years followed by 3 years of use. Surely it would have been simpler if planning permission is given for a standard period of 2 to 3 years for the demolition, then a condition for the temporary storage for 3 years. That would require the ceasing of use after the period, removal of welfare facilities, fencing, etc. Environmental health proposed conditions for hours of opening for the demolition and the staged storage operation. The officer has recommended conditions for the demolition but not for the storage operation. Should there not be a condition for both, as in paragraph 104 the planning officer states, noise and disturbance from deliveries can be minimised by a condition restriction, but has not recommended this. As it is unknown what will be stored at the site, we welcome the conditions in the planning officer's recommended, but we do have concerns with storing of vehicles of fuel of EV type and battery storage, as this will be open storage with no means of containing any contamination of the local watercourses. In paragraph 81 of the local highway impact, it again states data relating to the fallback position, where it assumes the site has been used to its maximum potential. This is not the case and therefore is misleading and should be given no weight. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Gary. Councillor Ball, in your capacity as ward member.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. As ward member, I'm speaking on behalf of Hepworth Parish Council and just highlighting a couple of things that Gary has covered very well in his speech. Although they broadly support this application, there are, as you will have heard, a number of matters that need to be addressed. The storage height is very contentious, and whilst it's appreciated that officers have negotiated this down to 10 metres, they do think that 5 metres would be more appropriate, because in areas 1 and 2, which are close proximity to housing, also from the 143, it's very open and they will be very noticeable. And if you just had the odd piece of equipment that was over 10 metres, fine. But if you had storage containers up to 10 metres, that's a very solid sort of a view. The other the other thing that is of concern is the nature of what is to be stored. And whilst it's understood that that's still all to be resolved, there's a lot of speculation and worry about the possible implications of what might go there. And it is suggested in the planning statement that some of the companies who may be interested in these storage facilities include bottle gas and battery suppliers. The PC are obviously pleased that there is a condition about the storage of vehicles. Finally, I think what the Parish Council are therefore seeking is some consideration for a reduction of the storage height to 5 metres and an assurance that there will be conditions in place to deal with the possibility of such storage items as gas and batteries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. And Adam Cornish, it's your turn as the agent. Thank you.
Good morning, members, and Happy New Year. The 8th of January seems a rather prompt return to the conference chamber, so I'd just like to thank officers for their work over the festive period and for members' attendance today. It is stressed from the outset that the application before you is a temporary planning permission, which will be implemented and used for a period of only 3 years. The extent of the application sits within the Shepherd's Grove Industrial Estate and utilises the existing concrete hardstanding. The proposals are relatively modest and seek a meanwhile use while the outline application addresses comments. This application is entirely separate and independent from that pending outline application, and it's simply a short-term means of creating jobs and addressing local demand. We hope it is agreed that Class B8 storage is acceptable at the site, given the historic use, adopted and emerging planning policy for this allocated employment site, a position that has recently been reinforced by inspectors following the hearings in their recent Week 3 action points published on the 3rd of December. There have been no objections received by members of the public, so I've focused on some of the concerns raised by nearby parishes. Since submission, as we've heard, the application has listened to feedback from parish councils and sought to address the comments raised. Improvements made over recent weeks include a reduction in the length of planning permission from 5 years to 3 years, a maximum storage height reduction from 15 metres down to 10 metres, as per the request of Walsham the Willows Parish Councils in their comments received in September 2024. 10 bat and bird boxes are now proposed around the site, which will also deliver a biodiversity net gain. We recognise concerns over the future occupiers of the site. This is not an application which seeks to secure Copart to occupy the site or for the site to be used as a vehicle scrapyard. The applicant is not in discussion with Copart, and the extent of the land would not meet their requirements. Members will recall that Copart required a number of buildings across the site: offices, preparation buildings measuring over 600 square metres, motorcycle stores over 1,000 square metres, and a processing building over 300 square metres. This temporary permission seeks no physical development other than fencing and a very small welfare unit. To provide comfort and to try and be transparent on the potential occupiers, we've made available to members a list of the serious inquiries received. Unfortunately, discussions with these prospective tenants will only go further once planning permission has been granted, and therefore we cannot provide any more certainty over the exact occupier. We hope that it is clear from the list made available that the site is attractive to a range of suitable occupiers and that there is demand and need existing for such a use in the area, even if it's only temporary. The application has been improved further by the conditions agreed in collaboration with officers, which should provide added comfort. External lighting details, a deliveries management plan, and additional transport information required for certain occupiers are all additional details which would need to be submitted and then approved by West Suffolk Council. These help further control the proposals and ensure all elements are thoroughly reviewed. A limit on noise levels is also contained at Condition 8. This is against a baseline of a relatively uncontrolled site, which of course can be reoccupied at any time. In regards to the highway's impact, the approach taken from the outset ensures that there will be no increase in traffic from what residents experienced when the site was fully occupied. This has dictated the extent of the storage areas from day one. Despite early positive comments from Highways, we've continued to engage with them and provided additional comfort where needed, and they retain that they have no objection to the proposals. Whilst the application only proposes a small amount of employment, it is employment nonetheless, as well as economic growth on a site which is largely vacant despite an employment allocation. The NPPF dictates that significant weight should be placed on supporting economic growth as well as business needs. Following the improvements made to the application, the absence of any objections from the public and statutory consultees, we hope that you will follow officer's recommendation to approve the application for a period of 3 years. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to field any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Gary. And before we go over to committee, some may already recognise we've got Peter with us from Suffolk County Council Highways, and I'm hoping you're able to stay for the remainder of the meeting. Thank you very much indeed. Good. Right, on that basis then, Councillor Thorndyke, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Several queries, questions, and a couple of points of information on this. One is on para 72. The last bullet point says consideration of the capacity of the proposed new highway with respect to the A143. I'm not aware of any proposed new highway with this application at all. Perhaps you can get an answer on that. The background describes this as a major proposal. I wonder if you can tell us how this comes up. As Shepherd's Grove Industrial Estate is an employment area, we are told that only 3 people will be employed across approximately 4 hectares. This does not sound very much like an employment area and doesn't bode well for the 80 hectares we've got in the local plan. If we apply the same rate to that, I think, what are we talking about? 60 people we're going to cater for jobs? So incredibly low. Stanton Parish Council object. Walsham, Hepworth will object apparently if they retain the 10-metre storage. Walsham object. Local residents' comments. The paper says none. They want to try reading the social media. Sadly, the people are going on there rather than coming on the council website. Planned period of 5 years, but development of only 3. This seems like an extract from the football pools, per only 3 from 5, and gives no certainty as to how long and appears to contradict itself. The paper reads, the applicants have therefore suggested that any permission for the change of use be limited to a period of 3 years from the date of first use for open storage, but no longer than a period of 5 years. And the last sentence in that says that it will be restored to its current use. Well, its current use in planning, as far as I'm aware, for section 2 is for mushroom sheds and mushroom composting plant. Will they be rebuilt as they were previously? 6, vehicle parking, it says out somewhere in the papers. Can we confirm what the vehicles are, please? Car, van, or whatever. No cycle parking, and no designated parking for HGVs, which are mentioned elsewhere in the papers. Bit worrying. We saw the 2-metre fence, security fence proposed around the perimeter of the building on one of the slides, but this is currently over 2 metres on the plan. Will it be reduced to 2 metres to comply? The papers mention another application for this site which has been running for a full year before this one was submitted and remains undetermined. The applicants state that it is unlikely to be brought forward within immediate future. Is there any explanation of why and how soon, please? The papers also state this will contribute to the local economy. Not sure how, but it does appear to add to the existing A143 problems, a predicted 400 movements in a every 12-hour shift. So I'm not quite sure how that all works out, because we're getting 3 jobs which are going to boost the local economy. I'm not sure. Para 8 tells us the site extends to 3.93 hectares and is located approximately 1k east of the village of Stanton. Para 76 states the village of Stanton is located approximately 2.5 kilometres to the east of the site. I'm not sure where I'm going home to after this meeting. I'm confused. Point of information, the papers state the hard standing has been in place since its use as an RAF wartime airfield, Shepherd's Grove. Most of Area 1, and Gary will know it, the runway is, and all of Area 2 is part of a post-war extension of that airfield. It is not part of the wartime airfield. Flying actually ceased in 1958, at the end of 58, not 66. And that particular parcel of land was sold by Secretary of State for Defence by public auction on the 15th of September 1965. That's information. Character assessment of the site commissioned by WSC in 2008 identified the area as having landscape character, blah, blah. Who is WSC? Because it can't be West Suffolk Council, not in 2008. Access to the site from Sumner Road. We get an application quoted in the list there, which is ends in 04, what's it gone? 0815. That planning application was specific to the Memo car development. It did not go into the estate. It was something that was, I think, it's fair to say, was rumbled by the planners at the time, because it appeared to open up the whole of the estate. There was no northern entrance to the estate at that time. The new access, which was granted in 2009, was SE 09-1106. That was a specific application to open up the access to all the site. But the application, the one quoted, does not do that. It only went just off the road and turned it. You can see it on the plans, the slides that were up there. The worrying bit for most of the people that are shouting at me, no storage of vehicles should take place on the site unless details of layout, delivery, drainage, pollution control and storage and disposal of any waste liquids have first been submitted to and agreed in writing by the local planning authority. Locals feel this sounds like Copart, and you can't blame them. It reads virtually the same, looks the same, and I know one of the inquiries appears to come from Mercedes to store vehicles. So that in itself is very worrying. The gentleman tells us that it's not anything like Copart or anything else, but it fits all the same boxes. Condition 7, there shall be no external illumination on the site. And it seems to say you can't have anything that will be brighter than the adjacent premises. Well, the adjacent premises being DHL. I don't know about from yours, Chairman, but from mine I can certainly see them at night with the night glow from that place. So it appears to be that what is to be granted will be an excessive amount of illumination. And bearing in mind they say there'll be no external illumination. But the condition the condition states that it will be no brighter than DHL. Very worrying. A quick bit of information on that. We used to have two 30-metre towers up on the airfield with floodlight assembly on the bottom. We used to be able to wind it up and down. 30 metres. When that was queried, we were told that you have to have them that high, but you cannot have loading and unloading of lorries or anything else in shadow. It has to be in light. So I don't know how this is going to operate with no external lighting, but open all hours. Open all hours is the query. Gary came up with it. There seems to be nothing in the paper that stipulates the actual operational hours of the site. We've got the construction and development for it, but not the actual operation, unless they're in the deliveries management plan, hidden away in there. But we have nothing that tells us when this site is actually going to be open in normal use. Can we have some clarification on that one, please, Chair? And that'll do for now.
Thank you, Councillor Thorndyke. Have you got anything left to address the table with, Carol? Councillor Bull, sorry.
You.
Yeah.
Quite worrying following that. Just a couple of things, really. Assurances that because there has been mentioned about gas and battery storage, what assurances are there that there will be sufficient restrictions on how they're doing? How would that kick into the process? you know, you can't condition every possible thing, but are there automatic things that happen if you want to store that? The other thing is there is a lot of concern about the height. Plots 1 and 2 are the closest to the housing and things like that. Would it be possible that there was a restriction on keeping it to 5 metres in plots 1 and 2, but allowing 10 metres on plot 3, which is further away? And just one comment, actually, in condition 124 on page 35, there is a duplication of the condition on car storage just when we come to things. But if I could just have some answers on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Miller-Jones, I'm not going to invite you to comment yet because there are so many questions that have come up. I want to give the relatively new team the opportunity to come back, and then I'll come straight to you. Thank you.
We're just going through your list of extensive questions, Councillor Thorndike, to make sure we do it justice. While Gary is just looking at the report to look at para 72, I'll see if I can answer your question in relation to the time condition and this 3 years versus 5 years, because I think I read that a few times to make sure I thought I knew what it meant. And Gary, you correct me if I've misread this. The use would only take place for 3 years. The reference to 5 years is that it then commences from the point at which the use starts rather than from the day on which we grant permission. So essentially it gives them up to 2 years to make the necessary preparations, find the operators who would be carrying it out, and then from the point at which the use commences, they only have 3 years. If they take longer than 2 years to get sorted, say they take 3, then that will start to eat into the amount of time which they can carry out the use, because there is an ultimate end stop of 5 years. So that's my understanding of that time condition. So hopefully that answers that question. Gary, I'll go back to you for specifically on 72, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, the comment in respect to paragraph 72, the last point, that is just an error. It's the capacity, it's the use and the capacity of the network has been considered. So yeah, that's just an error in word in the drafting of that bullet point on that one.
And it was what the restoration would be in terms of what it would go back to, the condition it says.
Right. Yeah. It's fairly simple in respect of it's a restoration of the site. So once the 3-year period is finished, it's just simply goes. It's to do with use. So it's not to do with buildings that have been and gone on the site. It's just the existing use, which is not exactly clear, I have to admit, because there is, it's fairly historic and mainly been given, over time. There's some very historic planning permissions on that area, but in terms of what it's used for, what its last use was for, as far as I'm concerned, that was really in connection with Suffolk mushrooms. But it's not to do with the reinstating buildings on the site. It's just simply that the site would be cleared, and its previous use shall be there extant and to enable any future employment on that site. But clearly, given the current applications on that site and the allocation, it's likely that further uses of that are going to come forward via a planning permission anyway. The vehicle, I think the vehicles question about the vehicles, that was to the parking. Should I come on to this? I seem to have lost my laser pointer. So I believe that was in connection with the parking here. As far as I'm aware, that is just simply for cars and small light vans. It's simply in association with the any staff that are on site. It's not proposed to park anything more than that in that particular location.
I know it's the nature of what type of vehicle storage, but I think that would be, it doesn't make any difference, it'd be the height. Yeah, I mean, obviously vehicle storage has been discussed and been mentioned already by the applicants as well.
there's nothing in this application which, that specifies a particular type of vehicle storage. It's not Copart, obviously. That is a different beast. They were storing and processing vehicles. What my understanding is, should there be any proposal that comes forward for vehicle storage, it purely is that. It's just a temporary storage of vehicles on site. And the reason why there's a condition in there would be to ensure that, because obviously if vehicles are potentially stored for a period of time, we want to be certain that the pollution considerations have been looked at and that sort of thing. So it's not a condition designed in mind of there being vehicle and storage processing on the site. It's purely, I suppose, it's just being careful, if you like, in terms of what goes on there. So whilst we're saying, there can be all sorts of different types of storage, there's particular ones that we feel there should be a condition for further details, and that one is vehicle storage, and then also self-storage as well, because that one is one with a use that would generate slightly more trips to the site. So we would want to be certain of that impact prior to that use commencing. Hence, there's a condition for that in the papers.
There's a question about the previous application, the live one, and why it's not coming forward. Is that the master plan?
I think Councillor Thorndyke mentioned the existing application on the site. It's undetermined, and why that's not coming forward. I mean, that's not really, in my view, it's not really relevant to the actual decision we're making on this application today. But in answer to the question, it's simply that there is still current outstanding objections on that application, and the applicants are seeking, before we actually bring it forward for determination to committee, they're seeking to address as many of those points as they can. And obviously, in the process of that application sort of being on hold, this application has come in, so we've chosen to deal with this at this time, and then that other following this resolution of this application, we'll then go back to look to deal with that current outstanding undetermined application, which I anticipate will probably come before members in the forthcoming months.
Do you want me to answer the question about the condition of the lighting and then the gas from the camera? That was the
Yeah, the lighting condition. I think Councillor Thorndyke was talking about where it references proposed condition 7, where it references there's no external illumination. It's not exactly saying that. What it's saying is that we would work for any external illumination on site. We would want to see details of that first. So it's not saying there shouldn't be any and then referencing what that should be. It's saying that if there is to be external lighting, you need to submit details of that first so that we can have control over that.
And just to add to that, I think the reference to neighbouring premises in that condition, the sort of tail part of that condition, and like Gary said, we would have the details. It's a note to them to say that when measured from the neighbouring premises, that it would be in line with the guidance, the Lux lighting. So it's not about matching the lighting on adjacent premises. It's a guidance to them. If they're to put a scheme in, then we're expecting the lighting to be, when measured from neighbouring premises, in accordance with the guidance that's set out and referenced in that condition. So that's the bit that refers to.
Thank you. I think deliveries management plan was referred to in terms of hours of operation and whether or not they're controlled. Well, the deliveries, and I mean, obviously with it being storage use, it's there permanently. The security staff will be there around the clock, that sort of thing. But in terms of deliveries, they will be they will be looked at and, if necessary, restricted within that deliveries management plan. So in terms of the hours when they're delivered. So what we would be seeking to try and control is when deliveries come to and from the site. The actual use of the site is unrestricted in terms of stuff would be on there, 24/7 if you like. In terms of Calagas storage, all I can say on that one is that any significant storage of gas containers on there, there's separate legislation which covers that, particularly with regards to the HSE and that sort of thing. There's quite a few hoops that would have to be jumped through for that. So it's not, and sits outside of planning control. in that regard. I think Councillor Bull mentioned, apologies if I've missed anything, Councillor Thorndyke, I might have to come back on those, but I know Councillor Bull mentioned about areas 1 and 2 and the potential for different storage heights to applicable to those areas. Something that I noted down actually. It is something that could be done. I think you could certainly have a for example, areas 1 and 2 restricted to 5 metres and areas 3 restricted to 10 metres. But obviously that will require further discussion with the applicant. So depending on the outcome of this discussion here now, if members are minded to approve the application subject to that change, then that's something that we could do delegated. We could go back to the applicant and seek their acceptance of that. Is there anything else? Oh, sorry, yeah, I know obviously Councillor Thorndyke made reference to various historical inaccuracies. I stand corrected if they're wrong, but I don't believe they have any bearing on the current application.
I think that's everything, but he may have to go back.
I will. Thank you, Gary and Penny. Councillor Thorndyke, would you like just to come back on some of these points? Because there was a lot to unpack in your presentation to the committee. So,
Just very quickly, the lighting, condition 7 says the scheme shall demonstrate that any external artificial lighting at the development hereby approved shall not exceed the lux levels of vertical illumination at neighbouring premises. Ignore all the bit about the regulations and bits and pieces. That's what it says. So as far as I'm concerned, that is saying, so long as you're below the light level of DHL, then the LPA will grant you permission.
That's not
Worries. Didn't get any answer on cycle storage, HGV storage, storage on vehicles, even new vehicles leak. So we need to be concerned with that one. Didn't get an answer on the fence being over 2 metres, which it is. And from what Gary said about the hours of operation of the site, it appears there are none. You can come and go as you want. And I don't think that's a very good idea. Thank you.
thank you, Councillor Thorndyke. Right, I'm going to come to Councillor Miller-Jones now, please.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just a small thing, just on sort of condition 11 about the materials that can be stored, about the odour and the dust and stuff. I'm just wondering. It says no items or materials should be stored that could be likely to give rise to significant odour or dust emissions, and I just wondered sort of who decides that and what happens when the applicant, like I said, if it's approved, the applicant then has somebody coming saying we want to store this on site. Do they then have to check with somebody whether that's appropriate for odour or dust? I'm just wondering how that actually works sort of practically. I'm assuming that when it comes to sort of hazardous materials, there are licenses that you would have to have from sort of environmental health. So I'm assuming that we don't have to sort of worry about that, but it's just really on the on this condition and how that actually works practically. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller-Jones. Councillor Neal, please.
Thank you. This one's for the highways, really, to be honest. In the papers, it says that between 2013 and 2017, since 2017, there hasn't been any recorded accidents. And I wondered what happened between 2013 and 2017 when there was accidents, and then all of a sudden at this junction there isn't. But then it comes to light that Suffolk Mushrooms, they ceased trading on there. But now we're putting another 400 traffic movements back onto the 143. The assumption is that we're going to be back into that accident rate, for want of a better term, that took place between 13 and 17. So you're judging it, the safety of that junction, on the fact that there's no Suffolk Mushrooms on the site anymore. But the traffic movements from this application's going to bring those levels back up, and that could become a hotspot again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. We'll come back to that, Peter. Councillor London, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, It seems to me that this application can be summed up by saying it's store some stuff on the hard surface until we have a full plan of what to do in the fullness of time, and stick a fence around it and put a porta cabin up for loos, and that's sort of the brass tacks what's happening here. And as a first pass, I don't think that's a particularly bad use for the site as a temporary use. But as always, the devil's in the details. So I'm sort of cautiously in favour, but I do like the idea of modifying the height that things can be stored at in different areas. I think that's something that we should look at. I'm also agree with Councillor Thorndyke that the lighting policy doesn't necessarily in black and white say what we hope it to say, and I would look for a condition that defines the light levels based upon how they are viewed from the nearest houses rather than the actual light levels on the site. So, for example, the apparent illumination levels will be no greater than the current illumination levels on the DHL site when viewed from the nearest houses. Something along those lines. And finally, I do think there are lots and lots of little questions that will come up over the next 3 years with regards to, they've moved this floodlight and that's shining on my window. There's a large thing there. Is it possible to have it stored in this area rather than that area? There are going to be a lot of questions from members of the public, and having a forum for them to be able to ask those questions formally and properly, I think, is not onerous and is a useful thing. And I would want to see that that local liaison board that is a holdover from the original from the other application, but I think is equally applicable to this application, just so that we can facilitate that open communication between the site and between residents to make sure that things will run as smoothly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor London. Councillor David Smith, please.
Thanks, Chair. I sympathise with the parish councils, obviously, with their concerns, but it is, at the end of the day, it is an employment site. It's not going to look pretty, is it, most of the time? And we need to bring this site back into use. I'm broadly in favour of it. I'm happy with the restrictions placed in the conditions. But we need to monitor what the users are going to be, who's going to be there, just to make sure that it isn't anything that's going to be, bad, for want of a better word. The 5 years is the maximum, isn't it? I mean, it's not going to be there's a possibility it could be cleared in 6 months, and it'll only be 3.5 years. So the worst it's going to be is 5 years. But anything that's put there, the height of it, shouldn't sort of have any bearing on any future. It shouldn't set a precedent for any future applications. So we'll have to see what happens, how it looks or whatever. It's been mentioned that there's only 3 employers going to be on the site. Yeah, but just bear in mind, if you have more employers, you're going to have more traffic movements. So, it swings and roundabouts there, isn't it? I think it mentioned in there about reverting to a previous use, not the current use. So what does that actually mean? Reverting it to an airfield? I'm not sure how far back you're going. What else there? Yes. I keep reading about a master plan for the area. When are we going to see the master plan? That'd be interesting. Other than that, pretty much broadly in favour of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David Smith. Again, I'm just going to draw a line up because, again, there's a lot to unpack in what's coming out of the committee debate. So I'm going to go back to officers again, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just if I can start with Councillor Thorndyke's outstanding queries. He did mention about the employment being low on site. I mean, that is clearly acknowledged in the report, but at the end of the day, it is still employment, a degree of employment, as I said, which could potentially increase over 3 years or stay the same, but that is acknowledged. a cycle storage, no, there's no cycle storage proposed. But we feel that's not a particular concern in this case, given the location of the site and the likelihood requirement for to drive to the site. But in any event, it's only a limited number of staff on there anyway, so we didn't feel that was a particular concern. The fencing, I'm not quite sure I'm understanding that query about the 2 metre height. Is it that the plans are wrong, or is there a conflict?
Councillor Thorndyke, that's it.
It's because the plans indicate a height of higher than 2 metres for the fence. You had the plans up on the wall and they've got the height on the fence on there, which is over 2 metres. But the condition says 2 metres. Now, are you saying it is 2 metres plus whatever is acceptable? In which case, why say 2 metres in the first place?
Thank you, Councillor Thorndyke. Just give Gary a moment.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to come back on that because I don't know where in the report it says 2 metres for the particular fencing. Because I think you mentioned a condition that mentions 2 metres. Yeah, I'll come back on that point, Chairman.
Okay, Gary, that's fine. Continue with the response.
Yep. So, Councillor Miller-Jones referred to the condition, I think it's condition 11, which is to do with, odour and dust emissions. Well, the way that would work, I've discussed that condition came about in discussion with our environmental health officer. Basically, the onus is on whoever's storing stuff on the site to accord with that condition. But should it give rise to dust emissions, etc., or any odour, fugitive odour, incidentally means the sort of temporary nature. It's not constant, but it could be temporary. Then there's separate recourse there through environmental health. So if we receive complaints about that, or we notice that it's happening, then our environmental health officers would look at that to see if there's a statutory nuisance occurring, in which case then they also have recourse to deal with it as a statutory nuisance, but then we can then also enforce that condition to remove those uses.
Can we look at that while I answer the lighting condition? While Gary has a look at but we've located your 2 metre reference, Councillor Thorndyke, so we're just having a look at that. I know the concerns about the lighting condition and the sort of tailpiece of that, and feel like it's adding some concern to members. The thing that concerns me about us kind of rewriting how we want it to be written is it needs to be precise. And I wouldn't want us to do that without our colleagues from the environmental health team who deal with those matters and enforce them being part of it. So I think if members were concerned with that sort of follow-on part of the lighting condition, my suggestion is that we keep it very clean and say that you cannot put up any lighting until we have had the details of it. And then that gives us the ultimate power to make that judgment, looking at things like the lux levels and how they would be viewed from the nearest properties, from various different receptors. I think if members are minded to look at that condition, that would be my suggestion, because rather than us coming up with some wording that may be with good intentions, perhaps then won't be precise enough to do what we want. So that would be my suggestion in relation to that, Councillor London. I know we have got a question for Peter, but I wonder if we come back to Gary first in relation to the fence, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, Councillor Thorndyke. I've worked it out now. I still understand where you're coming from. That is an error in the report. It says 2 metres. It is actually 3 metres. The 2 metres is nearer the height of the posts that support it. But no, it is. I think it's actually nearer 3.4 metres as a security fence. So that is the correct height as per the plans, not as per the report. So that was an error.
I think that's all the questions for us now.
Okay, thank you. I think officers think they've cleared all the questions, albeit some people might want to come back.
Councillor Neil had one for Peter Bradfield.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Councillor, your question about accident history. The period 2013 to 17, there were 3 accidents at the Sumner Road A143 junction. One of those was recorded as a serious accident and 2 were recorded as minor accidents. And I think it's acknowledged that in the following period, when there was less intense use of that, it's understandable that the number of accidents would have reduced. And that is what occurred. In the last 5 years that we've assessed, 2019 to 2024, there have been no accidents, but one has occurred recently. That's a very nasty accident, unfortunately, that resulted in a fatality. That accident, from what I've been able to ascertain from speaking to Suffolk Police and to other highways colleagues, was a single vehicle accident, but that report hasn't yet been published to clarify all of those details. So I think looking at that accident history in the round over the period of time, there isn't any evidence that there's a history of severe impacts at the highway here, though that level of accident history is not unusual. And if one looks either side of this particular junction at the accident history over these similar periods of time, there doesn't appear to be a pattern of accident history at the junction which alerts us to a severe problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. Carol, please. Sorry. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to propose this approval, subject to the condition that we could look at reducing to 5 metres in the 1 and 2, and obviously the lighting thing as well. Thank you.
Does that get support with a seconder, please? Councillor Glossop, would you like to speak at the moment?
Yes, please. I had got my light on anyway.
You
to
had,
speak,
yes.
So shall I say that first, and then I do second the proposal with the conditions that Councillor Bull is suggesting. But what I was going to say is this area is in the existing local plan. It's in the future local plan, and the usage is in the local plan, and I don't think it actually says in the local plan that it's got to be certain things that can be stored. So, I go along, I think we've got to get and use this land because it's employment land, and this is only temporary. And I do actually think we should have a liaison group. I always say this whenever we have these sort of plans come forward. I think it's very useful to have a liaison group, if necessary, with the community, because if problems happen, that can be dealt with. So I do support Councillor Ball's proposal. Thank you.
But are you also proposing that we add?
Yes. Oh, yes. Sorry.
The
Yeah.
liaison board added as a...
I think so, because it's always very good to have something where the community can liaise with the applicant. Thank you.
So protocol demands I ask Councillor Ball if she's happy to accept that as an additional item. Thank you. Right, moving on. Councillor Waldron, please.
Thank you, Chair. I broadly accept the fact that we need to approve of this proposal, but I've got a problem with this argument about 10 metres and 5 metres. Looking at it, it's an economy of scale. Originally, they wanted 15 metres. Then it's been knocked back to 10. Now we're going to knock it back even further. How far are you going to knock it back? And will it become economical for them to do it? bearing in mind we're trying to get employment into the area and everything else. Minimal employment, I might add, but it's still employment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waldron. Councillor Mildmay-White, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's been moved and seconded, so I'm not going to prolong the discussion any further, but just to say that I will support this because it is employment land, and I think as a temporary permission, it will give us an opportunity to assess what these buildings look like and the vision from the main road too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mildmay-White. Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I like the idea of the liaison group, but that sort of thing only works as long as things are taken on board and acted upon. Otherwise, the residents' concerns can fall on deaf ears. So hopefully that will be taken on board and worked in the best of spirits. I just going back to the building that's on the site, I didn't notice any disability ramps to that building. So I think that needs to be a consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. All right, I'll go back to officers now because there's obviously some issues that are cropped up.
Thank you, Chairman. Note obviously the proposal with the liaison group condition. That's fine. We can take that forward with the applicant. And regarding the welfare building, my understanding that the disability side of that would be covered by building regs. Obviously, I'm not sure. Obviously, it's a temporary building. Obviously, ultimately for 3 years. But my understanding is that is covered under that. So they would have to, and it wouldn't be difficult. I wouldn't have thought to make it compliant anyway in terms of installing a ramp.
Yeah, we're just looking at the condition regarding the liaison group, and obviously members all know we always have to be minded that in putting a condition on, we have to be mindful of the 6 tests. So, it needs to be necessary in planning terms and it needs to be reasonable. Now, officers' view when we did this report and we were looking at this application is we didn't feel it was necessary. Members obviously feel differently on that. I suppose what I would put out there just as a thought for members and something that we could pursue as an option instead. We do have the option to have informatives on planning conditions, and I think one of the members, it may have been Councillor Neal, said that these things, regardless of how they're secured, it's all about everyone's goodwill and to what extent people are listening in any event. So we could have, by way of an informative on this decision, about setting up some sort of liaison group, and members and the applicant could work towards that in any event. I query whether strictly it's necessary enough to have it as a full planning condition, but I do hear your concerns, and I'm sure that the applicant would, want to do what they could as well to ensure that this goes as smoothly as possible with the community. So I'll just put that back to, I think it was Councillor Glossop who suggested that, and see if that would allay your concerns. I'm just slightly worried that it could not meet the tests, and in which case they could apply to remove it, and obviously then we'd be nowhere. We could take a more sort of proactive and pragmatic approach by way of an informative on a decision.
That was the reason for the slight pause there, because I was unconvinced we could condition it, but an informative is actually, and I think as the agent you're nodding anyway, the informative actually should support what you're attempting to achieve, which I agree with, by the way. So the conditions as I see that were proposed by Councillor Bull and seconded by yourself were, and I've made some scratchy notes here, so forgive me if I've got this wrong, but you're suggesting areas 1 and 2, the height would be reduced to 5 metres, but area 3 could be 10. Is that where we are?
Yes.
Yeah. And that the light level would be a reference back to our planning and environmental team prior to getting approval for any lighting. Yeah. But it would now not have a strict condition on the liaison board. It would be an informative. Comments, please.
Yes, I agree to that. I think the agent will have picked up on that.
He has,
and also, if people have concerns, they can always go to the parish council to take them. So, yeah, I'm happy with that.
Councillor Glossop?
Yes, it's all well and good that we agree this kind of thing here. We're all sat here and it's all lovely. Then this operation starts and residents have problems. So unless we have some way of those residents' views being heard and taken on board, unless we can say, well, the residents then have got to get in touch with their ward councillor and the ward councillor will do something about it. But we have got, because we agree things here and then down the line, something else happens. And so I'm just trying to ensure that the residents, because at the end of the day, the community is more important than us, aren't they? And we have to make sure that their concerns are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glossop. Councillor London, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to check, because I could sort of hear almost a capitalisation of the word informative. I'm wondering whether you're using it in a special, as a piece of specialised terminology, and if you could just explain exactly what we mean by that word.
Will do. Councillor Thorndyke, please.
Yeah, just a quick query on the fencing again. Did I hear that has now gone up to 3 metres?
I think
seems a bit strange because we've got the plans here which say 2.050 metres. That's what I'm arguing about. It's over 2 metres. Now I hear they've gone to 3 metres. Is that true? If so, do we need another set of plans or something for it?
Okay, Councillor Thorndyke.
Or even a condition?
I certainly heard it at 3.4 metres. Yeah, in all fairness. But it's worth. I haven't gone back to officers quite yet. For final comments. I'm hoping these will be final comments from officers and we can... Yes, Councillor Thorndyke.
Yeah, just a quickie. The fence panels are 3.4 metres long. Actually, they're 3.476 or is it 16 long? It's very small print, even I'm having problems. But they are 2.050 metres high, which is in excess of 2 metres.
Yes. I haven't been any help in this, by the way, because I can't see that print, in all fairness. 2025 might be a visit to the opticians. Right, back to you, officers.
Yes, just in relation to planning informatives. So when we have a decision notice issuing a grant of planning permission, it will be a numbered conditions on that decision. And then following that, we can add a number of informatives. Some of those are standard and required by legislation, things about acting positively and proactively. We might have other informatives that our colleagues at the County Council may have asked us to apply, just drawing to people's attention where there may be other regulations that they need to apply with. But we can also use it as an opportunity to highlight and draw out something, an expectation or something that we want further attention to. So it's a way of communicating with an agent in a more formal and public way about the expectations of something associated with that permission, but slightly different to the sort of legal purpose of a planning condition, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Penny. And Gary, anything on the fence? It hasn't gone up in height again, has it, by any chance?
I should trust my own instincts because it is 2 meters. It's 2 meters. I've put in the report 2 meters. The height is 2 meters or thereabouts. And that is on the drawings. The width is, as just been pointed out, is 3.4 metres, the actual width of the fencing. So I think I got caught unawares there, but I believe that what I've said in the report is right.
2 metres or 2.05 metres? Could we just move? Could we move on the basis it's 2 metres, Councillor Thorndyke, please? Have we got any unanswered questions for you, Peter, by any chance? I don't think we have. I think you, Councillor Neil, raised the matters and you've had a satisfactory response. So that's good. On that basis then, are there any final responses from officers?
No.
Any final questions from committee? Right. Let me see if I can get this right. So with the 5 metre limit in areas 1 and 2 and the 10 metre limit in area 3, and the light level issue to be resolved outside of this committee meeting by seeking the applicant to submit details of lighting scheme, Councillor Ball proposed approval in line with the officer's recommendation, and Councillor Glossop supported it as a seconder. Could I see a show of hands in favour of approval, please? And those against, please. And finally, any abstentions?
So that's 15 votes in favour, 1 abstention. So the motion is carried and the application is approved.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Right, does anyone need a comfort break before we start the second one? Okay, so we're going to have a comfort break. It's 25 past 11 on my watch now, so we'll 25 to 12. Thank you. Just make yourself comfortable, Councillor Glossop. Okay, we're all settled. I'll just re-emphasise this is actually agenda item 6, land north of Prigmore Drive, and James is the presenting case officer. So please begin, James, when you're ready.
Hello. So this morning we're considering DC 240971. It's a full planning application for a micro-energy storage system at land north of Prigmore Drive, Mount Road, Bury St Edmunds. The application is being presented at a committee today as Bury Town Council support the application, which is contrary to the officer recommendation of refusal. This application was presented at delegation panel on the 21st of the 10th last year, and the committee site visit took place on the 2nd of December last year. This application was due to be presented within the December committee, but was withdrawn from the agenda to correct the site address and allow time for reconsultation. Just by way of explanation, the electrical storage system would connect to the low voltage network, and it works by storing excess energy during low demand periods. It releases power during peak usage. It provides, or it can provide, emergency backup power locally, reduce carbon emissions by optimising grid usage, and it is also projected to save 160 tonnes of carbon annually. So based on what information has been submitted in my own research, those carbon savings arise from the ability to effectively stabilise local power supply. So if the power is generated at, say, a gas power station and then distributed to the grid, that then supplies the local area in very simple terms. So when demand is high, the battery box can then input energy back into the local area, as opposed to the, say, gas power station having to work harder, producing more carbon emissions to meet this demand. Similarly, when demand is lower and perhaps energy prices are lower, the energy box can then store that excess energy. By way of a comparable, tangible comparison to what 160 tonnes of carbon is equivalent to, we've been provided with some comparisons by the applicant. So what we are told is that 1 tonne of carbon is roughly equivalent to the electricity consumption of 0.65 of a household or driving a gasoline car 5,000 miles. So if you take that number by 160 tonnes in this case, that would be equivalent to the electricity consumption of 104 households per year, or driving a car 800,000 miles. And this has a 30-year life cycle, so you would effectively multiply that number by 30. In respect of West Suffolk Council's own goals, not that this proposal could necessarily detract these savings from our own goals, we do have an environmental statement. So from April 2026 to March 2030, our goal is to reduce carbon emissions by 840 tonnes. So this would be roughly 1/5 of that figure. This is on land owned by Suffolk County Council, and I will get onto the presentation more in a moment. So in theory, it could contribute towards their scope for emissions. So this slide shows the submitted site location plan. The development is proposed, as I said, adjacent Mount Road and northwest of Prigmore Drive. It consists of a vegetated buffer separating Mount Road from a regional cycle path and modern residential development beyond. The landscape buffer is part of the comprehensively planned wider development, which will be shown later within this presentation. The box is also proposed to the west of an existing bus shelter, which I'll show within some photographs later. And as I said, it's on land owned by Suffolk County Council. This is just an aerial view to provide a slightly clearer understanding of the development surrounding the site, very roughly marked in a red arrow, by a red arrow. So this slide shows the amended proposed block plan. So the amended design incorporates a 4-box system with 1 cabinet. This is actually a slightly smaller enclosure than what was originally submitted, and it includes a gap of 0.5 metres for, at the moment, only indicative details for soft landscaping to the southern facing side. So the units themselves, or the boxes, would face front Mount Road, adjacent the footpath, and then the 2.4 metre tall acoustic fencing adjacent the cycle path. At this moment, there's no landscaping proposed to either the northern, western or eastern boundaries, mainly due to the constraint to the site. So these are the proposed elevations of the units and cabinets themselves. So in total, the units would be 4.6 metres wide, 1.8 metres deep and 2.1 metres tall. The cabinet, 2.15 metres tall, 1.5 metres in depth and about 0.5 metre wide. So this slide is the elevation of the proposed acoustic fence and an idea of what it would look like, which, as I said, is going to be 2.4 metres tall and necessary to help mitigate impacts upon residential amenity. This is a very helpful visual provided by the applicant. Just gives you a clearer understanding of what the proposal would look like with that specification of acoustic fencing and 4 units or boxes. So this slide, so the next 2 slides cite photographs and videos. So this slide shows photographs from October. So the first one shows the location of the box next to the bus stop and then a view looking east down Mount Road. This photograph is also from October and just shows the visual perspective, pardon me, from the footpath, cycle path. This photograph is from December at the time of the committee site visit and shows the location of the battery box again and just another view looking down Mount Road. So we are looking here, if you can see that. So moving on to the videos, I might have to disable the... How do you get back to
You
it?
just click it again on the laser pointer and it'll turn it off. Just do it again. There we go.
I'm just going to make sure there's no sound. Might be quite... There we go. So this is the first video. There's 2. So this is the view from Mount Road. Hopefully it loads well. That's the extent of it. And then the next video, again, making sure there's no sound. So this is the view from the cycle path, and then we're turning west, looking towards where it would be located. Cool. Put the laser pointer back on. So the following 2 slides are snippets from the approved soft landscaping scheme, and again the site indicated by a red arrow. So this is the part of the approved plans for the residential development to the rear, showing the site to be covered by landscaping. Perhaps slightly more importantly is the next plan here. This slide shows the site to be in phase 3 of strategic landscaping. So this was purposely retained, dash enhanced as part of the residential development to the south. Moving on to consultative comments. Highways have no objections and recommend no conditions. Bury Town Council have been consulted twice and recommend approval. Suffolk Fire Service have been provided with the specifications of the system and have no objections. Public Health and Housing have been consulted twice. As it was identified within the report, during the reconsultation to amend the site address, an amended acoustic assessment was also provided to reflect the updated technical layout, because where originally it was 2 units, it was now 4, although technically the size of the enclosure had actually reduced. So subject to a condition ensuring installation of that acoustic fence and any other mitigation measures within that acoustic report. Public Health and Housing have no objections. The ecology officer in-house did raise some concerns pertaining to the loss of shrub, landscaping and potential impacts upon the hedge itself. In the view of officers, these impacts could be suitably mitigated through an appropriately worded condition. That would include a condition securing details of landscaping to the front, as at the moment it's only indicative. Ward Councillor Major has raised strong concerns regarding the location of the proposed development, regarding visual impacts and, I think most importantly, potential risk to highway safety. There have been no public representations. So the proposed development attracts significant weight in the planning balance from paragraphs 161 and 168 of the updated MPPF for its environmental benefits, and that's noted within the report. However, in the view of officers, the development would be contrary to paragraphs 131, 135 and 139 of the MPPF. In addition, policy CS3 of the St Ed's core strategy, and lastly DM2 and DM13 of the current joint development management document, and all of which policies strive for high quality, appropriately located development. In this case, as set out within the report, we consider the development would result in a loss of part of an area of strategic landscaping and erode the green buffer. Due to its very prominent location and the battery box's stark and utilitarian appearance, we are of the opinion that it would appear as an incongruous feature in the street scene. So whilst we strongly recognise the very clear environmental benefits of this proposal, the harm to the area's character and loss of landscaping in this case is considered to outweigh this benefit, and as such the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, James. We've got two registered speakers. We've got Councillor Birgitta Major, and Helen has done her best to put together the individual representations that she made, and we'll read the statement out. And then we've got Ben Wallace from, is it AMP or AMP? AMP. Okay, AMP Energy. Fine. Okay, Helen, over to you, Councillor Birgitta Major's statement.
I am greatly worried about this application from the County Council. This is a very large construction close to houses and the road. Should a car or HGV have an accident? Have alternative sites been considered? This unit is right next to a major road that will increasingly take much more traffic. It is also right next to a bus station and domestic housing. I appreciate that the county owns the land, so it is a convenient way to put this unit. It is wrong though, and I hope you will all support the officer's view to object. I have nothing but reservations about this planning application. The 200 kilowatt station is in the wrong place. It bodes huge potential risks to children and adults alike waiting at the bus stop. It is very close to housing and a major busy road. It destroys the green belt that is already hiding an unsightly station a bit further down the road. I sincerely hope the committee will support the planning officer in rejecting this application.
Thank you very much indeed, Helen. And then we've got Ben. You've got your 3 minutes, Ben, from when you begin speaking.
Thank you. My name is Ben Wallace. I'm Head of Development for AMP Clean Energy, the applicant in this case. Building the infrastructure of the future within the existing built environment is difficult. Finding sites like this is very difficult. We look at about 1,400 sites for every site that we bring to planning consent. It shows you just how hard it is. This site is actually in an existing break within the hedgerow, and I suspect many of you saw that on your site visit. And I want to thank the officer. I think the officer did a fantastic job in working with us to put forward our best scheme, despite the fact that clearly I don't agree with his recommendation for refusal. And I think we need to make sure we're very clear about the benefits here. That this project will save 5,000 tonnes of carbon over the lifetime of the project. But it will also improve the resilience of the local electricity network. And people say, why here? Why in a residential area? Why not in an industrial area? Well, we do build them in industrial areas, and it helps that industrial area. But it doesn't help that area, the local area where those houses are. And those houses want EVs, they're going to want heat pumps, they're going to want the other low carbon technologies that are going to help us reach a net zero future. And battery boxes and energy storage locally will do that. Yes, it's hard to find sites, but we've got to try and find them and do the best that we can. And I think the new government really agrees with that. The updated NPPF, as the officer pointed out, which came out in December, has changed the emphasis. And it states now that local planning authorities should support all forms of renewable and low carbon development. And further, that local authorities should give significant weight to the proposal's contribution to renewable energy. The fact is, if we are serious about net zero, we've got to start acting now. If we are serious about net zero by 2030, we need projects urgently, not in 10 years, not in 20 years, we need them to be built right away. And if West Suffolk Council is serious about its own climate emergency, which you declared in 2019, and your council's objective to be net zero by 2030, I think we need to think very hard about whether or not we should be refusing projects like this. Planning is about balance, so let's consider the adverse impacts. The site is adjacent to an existing bus stop, but within an existing rake within the hedgerow. It is not immediately overlooked by properties. If you're driving at 30 miles an hour down that road, you will see this equipment for less than half a second. If you're cycling, perhaps, depending on how fast you cycle, it might be a second or two. But does that impact genuinely offset all the benefits that this project brings to the local community and more broadly to our net zero objective? I think the balance, the officer's not quite right in this case, despite I do appreciate the help he's worked with us. And I ask maybe that the committee think that perhaps in this instance, this small reduction in visual impact for a blink of an eye is perhaps not a reason to refuse such an important project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Ben. Right, committee. The screen's lit up. We start with Councillor David Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think the objections are pretty subjective and a bit, yeah, I can't really agree with the objections. And I think any biodiversity issues it's been said that they can be mitigated by condition. So I wouldn't, no problem at all supporting the application. I think I'd probably go as far as recommending or proposing approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I can take that as an early proposal. Is that seconded by anybody? Councillor Miller-Jones, please. Did you want to speak at this point? You are on the, I think you are, oh, you're not on the list. Oh, yes, you are. That's good. Please go.
Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely support approval of this. I think the policies are in conflict because we've got a lot of policies that are saying we need to be doing stuff for carbon. I mean, the fact that this would go as far as a fifth of the target for carbon reduction, that's a huge amount. And I think, obviously visual impact matters, but I think it matters a lot less than the climate emergency. Just a small point that in Councillor Major's representation, she said that it's very large, but it's actually very small. We saw the image of the size of it. The only thing that I would say is the root protection area. Obviously, we would need a condition to make sure. So I would like to sort of add as part of that proposal that we condition to make sure that that hedgerow is protected and that there's adequate conditions in there to make sure that that root protection, that the roots aren't damaged. But yeah, apart from that, I completely support it. I think it's really important. And the speaker from AMP basically said everything I was going to say. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, so coming back to you, Councillor Smith, reasons for not agreeing with the officer's recommendation between you and Councillor Miller-Jones. Could you try and summarise it, please?
How do I put that into words?
I think it's subjective, the visual impact. I think it's small because of where it is. I don't agree that the visual impact is a big deal, especially compared to all the policies that say that we should be doing things to reduce carbon. That's what I would say. Do you agree?
I agree. Absolutely. I don't know if that's it.
I'm pleased that you both agree.
Yeah.
Right, moving on, if I may. Councillor Holder, please.
Thank you, Chair. Not much I can add to that, actually. It doesn't... Fortunately, some of us went on the site visit there and we could see it in its environment. And I don't think it detracts from the street scene per se. You've got an open gap there where the bus shelter is. And if it's that dangerous, busy road, you wouldn't actually put a bus shelter where the kids are going to get mowed down by a lorry, would you? So it's not likely to get vehicle damage down there. And this is the sort of thing, unfortunately, maybe against objections that we're going to have to do for the future if we're to meet, national guidelines and our own climate emergency thoughts on these things, whether you agree with that or not. It's something that we're going to have to do. And maybe when our planners are talking to developers about things, there should be inclusion for these sort of sites in the plans where our applicant is saying it's very difficult to get these sites. This is their land, so it's perhaps a little less difficult. But, if we're going to harvest cheaper electricity during these sort of small hours of the morning, why not have one of these boxes safely tucked away somewhere on a new housing development? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Councillor London, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was keen for this to come to full committee, even though I am even now undecided on the application. I've got a few sort of thoughts about this. I don't think that the disbenefit of getting rid of a couple of shrubs versus the wider environmental benefit of something like this has been properly looked at. I do think that the wider environmental benefits are important. As we have an officer from Highways, I was wondering if we could ask what would be the anticipated impact if there was a vehicular collision with this unit? With your experience, what kind of things would we expect to see? Is it hardened to be able to withstand such things? There was something that was mentioned with regards to the amount of CO2 saved, and the applicant mentioned 5,000 tonnes. However, we've previously said 160 tonnes per year. That doesn't match, and I just wanted a definitive answer on how much carbon we are anticipating this to save. And then finally, and this is not the application in front of us, so obviously we can't do anything about that now, but it's really ugly. It's really gawping. I'm imagining 100 years ago, when the post office was putting telephone boxes on our streets, and over the last 100 years, these pieces of street furniture have become so beloved, they've become a symbol of our nation. And we are doing the same thing now. We are putting in place energy storage systems, and this is going to be the kinds of things we're going to have for the next 100 years. And I'm wondering whether we could have a little bit more civic pride. We can't make them just disappear, so why don't we make them more visually appealing? That's not something we can do for this one, but it's something for the applicant to take back.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Councillor London. Councillor Waldron, please.
Yeah, well, a couple of questions. Is this inside a conservation area? That's the first question. If it's not, you've got to read the MPPF from 2024, paragraph 168, that states, when determining a planning application for all forms of renewable low-carbon energy developments and associated infrastructure, the planning authority should not require applicants to demonstrate the overall need for renewable carbon. B, recognise that small-scale projects, and C, this application, this whole thing, so paragraph 23 all the way through, basically it's saying, listen, boys, just pass it. Thank you very much.
Maybe you should add "and girls" to that comment. Thank you, Councillor Waldron. Yeah, that's true. Yes. Yes. Councillor Sayer, please.
Thank you, Chair. I basically want to agree what has been said, although I'd like to support the officers in their decision. I believe this is a question of balance, and whereas they have come down one side, I believe that I fall on the opposite side, because on balance, with no objection from the fire and the environmental people, and with a positive contribution to our net zero target, I'd like to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Sayer. Councillor Mildmay-White, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be supporting the officers on this. This site is particularly close to Rougham, about a couple of 100 metres beyond here, Rougham village starts, although somebody has conveniently removed the sign that actually says Rougham, so nobody can any longer be aware of that. If the new local plan is adopted, there will be a huge amount of house building in this area, and I think there should be a more holistic view taken of this whole area and what sort of storage capacity is going to be needed in the future. If we're really serious about net zero, then why are we not putting solar panels on all those warehouses that have been built on Rougham Industrial Estate and the new houses that are going up on Lark Grange? You know, this is just a little sticking plaster of something added on at the end. We need to be thinking about this, as Councillor Holder said, at the very beginning of these plans. They should now be included in the master plans, along with much more serious consideration given to solar panels. So knowing Mount Road as I do, because I obviously travel down it quite a lot, this is a particularly obtrusive, unattractive block right next to a well-used cycle path and bus station. Yesterday, there was a crash on Mount Road. The road was closed in Bury St Edmunds after a two-car crash next to where two cars collided near a cycle path. This was about 50 to 100 yards from where this proposed battery is proposed to be located, outside Braybrook Close, which was the next turning down from where we all parked when we went on the site visit. So to my mind, this is a entirely inappropriate place to put this very large, unattractive battery storage with a huge, tall fence facing the cycle path and facing the houses the other side of the cycle path. It is going to be very intrusive. And when you're standing at that bus shelter, it's going to look particularly unattractive as well. So to me, let's take a much more holistic view of what's happening up there. Let's get other companies together to decide how much battery storage we're going to need in the future and make a plan for the future, rather than just this little ad hoc bit that somebody has decided we need now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mildmay-White. I'm going to take a break now so officers can respond to the points that have been raised so far. So over to you, James and Penny.
I think the first question was Councillor London's about how much carbon. I'm fairly certain that the yearly saving would be 160, but then it's the life cycle. That's the life cycle of 30 years. That's the 5,000. I think it might have been said in the report or the information, perhaps 4,700. I'm not very. I can't do 160 times 30 in my head, admittedly. So I couldn't disagree that yes, it would be around 5,000 tonnes of carbon over the life cycle. In response to Councillor Waldron, no, it's not in a conservation area. There was a question about highway safety. I think it was directed to highways. I would just add that there's no reason in the officer report that considers highway safety as a reason for refusal. If you look, regarding kind of fire risk, I mean, I guess there's two things to consider here. Is the risk of someone crashing into it is probably relatively low because it's set off the footpath. I don't think there's much more to say there. In respect of fire risk, that starts at paragraph 54. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I can give a very brief overview, but effectively what we have and what we have seen and what the fire service has seen is the specification. So there's a suppression system with aerosol, and then there's also liquid and forced air cooling. And this particular type of battery is lithium iron phosphate, which are generally, as I understand, safer, more modern battery. And then also in 54, 56, 57, there's a lot more guidance on how that's controlled outside of planning. So we would, there's this permission, but then they also have to make sure that you're not putting in something unsafe. So I just thought I'd clarify that matter. But if Highways had any additional comments to make, that might be helpful.
Yeah, just to further clarify on the carbon, because I think Councillor Waldron made an important point. We don't need to really get too bogged down in precise numbers. The NPPF does direct that we should be giving these things significant weight. So I don't think we need to over-analyse the precise figures. The fact is that it makes a contribution, and that's important, and national policy reflects that. I do just want to note, because there was some mention to the West Suffolk reduction and this contributing towards it. I'm not sure. I think the West Suffolk commitment may be in relation to our own and the things that we have control. So I just want to make sure that members aren't basing it on that and it being a proportion of that target. It's more about, and what I'm hearing from the debate, is members are giving more weight to that benefit in terms of the contribution towards climate change and renewable energy. One thing just to put out there in terms of that really important material consideration, it doesn't still change our starting point being the plan. And obviously your officers feel that it does conflict with those policies. So we've come to a different balance to you, potentially, that is okay, but I want you to know that the NPPF doesn't stop the plan being the starting point. Those policies that your officers feel that it conflicts with are the starting point for our decisions. So what we would need to have, you would need to be able to have and to articulate is that you have a material consideration that outweighs those. And that's perhaps what some of you were saying in debate, but we'll come to that as the debate progresses.
Thank you, Penny. Peter, have you got anything to add? Because I know there was a question directed to your potential knowledge or experience.
Yeah, Councillor London asked the question about highway safety. I have to say, Councillor, I haven't had any experience of this sort of infrastructure going in the past, so I can only talk in general terms, if that's okay. Any substantial object in the vicinity of the highway could be detrimentally affected if there was an accident, whether or not that be a building or a tree. There's so many things, of course, that unfortunately cause vehicles to stop very quickly and dangerously. So I think that's the context, really. I'm not sure if it would be right of us to consider this to be any higher risk than any other structure within the vicinity of the highway in terms of that highway accident impact danger. In relation to the danger perhaps to the vicinity rather than to the actual vehicle that caused the accident, my experience doesn't extend to being knowledgeable about that, but I think I would take the lead from the fire service authority really as to what's the appropriate means of reducing risk. And they are satisfied that the application is doing that in a way which is acceptable to the fire service. Is that an answer to the question?
Seems so, Peter. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor.
Right, continuing now, Councillor Whittam, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if this sort of infrastructure is really needed, why don't the people proposing the siting of these things get in with the planners and the developers? I mean, let's face it, this is a relatively new area of housing at the outset so that it can be designed in, and then we won't have all this argument about it being at the side of the road or next to a bus stop, blah-de-blah. That's my first point. Now, we're told that it's going to save 160 tonnes of carbon dioxide per year, 5,000 tonnes over its lifetime. But that ain't strictly true, because there has been no figure given forward that how much carbon was released for the manufacture of the batteries in the first place, right from when the lithium is mined, where the trucks on those sites probably burn 800 to 1,000 gallons of diesel a day, the ships that take this lithium ore to be refined, the factories that actually refine the lithium, and then the transportation of these finished product batteries all over the world. So we are not saving 160 tonnes per year. Probably we might just about be breaking even. So we're not saving carbon emissions into the atmosphere. All we're doing is transferring it into another area. And those are my thoughts on it. Apart from that, I'm...
Thank you very much, Councillor Whittam. Where are we next? Councillor Neil, then Councillor Glossop. Councillor Neil, please.
Thank you, Chair. My take on it, I'm with the officers. I'm for refusal. I can hear all about the savings of carbon, all those figures, and they all go over my head, so I'm not too fussed about that. And you wouldn't be surprised to hear that from me. But yeah, I'm sure it does its job, but is it the right thing in the right place? That's what concerns me. And just because there's no history of there being a collision today, up to today, that doesn't mean there isn't going to be one in the future. We've heard about one that's just 100 yards down the road from this proposed site, and it could just have easily have been on hitting this site if it was to go ahead. If there's a fire on one of these, the fire department may well be happy with what's in place, but there's a history of battery storage facilities going up in flames, and they can't be handled as you would put a fire out with water. They're covered with this blanket, the fire department would tell you, and they have to burn themselves out, and they burn for days, and they emit toxic gas right in front of this housing estate. So just because there's no problems today doesn't mean there's not going to be one in the future. And I think it's a wonderful idea what they've got, but it's the right idea in the wrong location. So I will be supporting the recommendation of refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Neil. Councillor Glossop, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, it's ugly, it's big, and it's in the wrong place. But my concern is, if we're going to have these boxes put across the country, and we've heard about how much carbon this is going to reduce, it's very small in what we're doing as a country. So if we can have these boxes just plonked anywhere, what's going to happen in the future when we've got all these boxes and they'll be out of date? Because if we look at the future and how we're going to save carbon or produce electricity, these are going to be old hat. And so therefore, my concern is we shouldn't be doing this because it's ugly unless we're going to say, OK, after, I think you said 30-year life, they will be removed. Otherwise, we're going to have these dumped everywhere. If this is going to be approved, then why? We've got acoustic fencing, I think that's going to go around it. And we're going to move greenery to put that there. Why couldn't that acoustic fencing have ivy growing on it so it looks pretty? And so I think if it is going to go there, it's got to be concealed. It's just such a big, ugly box. And it's all right to be told about the amounts of carbon it's going to save, but we've got to look at this as a country, not little bits here and there. And I think we're meddling and we're cluttering up our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glossop. Councillor Bull, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do actually support approval. I think on balance, the benefits of it do outweigh the harm it might cause. I'm in total agreement with Councillor Marmay-White that says we need to look at it in the future in a much more strategic way. But this is what we're being asked to sort out, because that other thing is going to take ages to come to. There's also been concerned if there was an accident, or just a few hundred, well, I don't know, I'm not good on distance, but just a little way down that road is another box. Have we been worried about an accident crashing into that? I take Councillor London's comment as well, that it's rather ugly. But rather frivolously, I would say, what about the bus shelter alongside it if we're going to create something beautiful? So on balance, I do believe the benefits outweigh the disadvantages. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Miller-Jones, please.
Thank you very much. So I actually have a couple of points to say in response to what my colleagues have said. What Councillor Whittam said about breaking even, that doesn't align at all with the data. There obviously is a carbon cost of the manufacture of battery storage, but all engineers involved in these projects, they have to look at whole life carbon as part of the project, which means they actually look at the cost of everything, of transport, of manufacture, and they actually include that in their calculations. It's not something that's just ignored. It's actually an essential and important part of that thing. So, you know, that's already covered. Those figures we will have been given will be the figures after the carbon cost has been considered. What Councillor Glossop said about ivy, I was going to suggest something similar. I was wondering about damage. Obviously, climbing plants, they attach to a fence. There could be issues there with them damaging the fence. I wondered if instead it would be possible to have planters attached to the top of the fencing that have falling plants that grow downwards, because those are pretty and they don't actually grab onto the fence. So I would suggest that as an option. And then just on what Councillor Marmay-White said, I agree, as others have agreed, that obviously when we're building things, we need to be considering those carbon things as we build. But the fact that she mentioned that more houses are being built in that area, that actually supports the fact that we need this, because those houses are going to need energy, and that actually is supportive of the fact that I think we should approve this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got two members waiting to speak, but officers might want to come back. We're trying to take these responses to questions in bite sizes today.
Yeah, a lot of things said, some quite interesting. So I think the first thing that's worth discussing is planting. I don't know whether we can put the slideshow back on the TV, so to see, but so yeah, this as I said is the amended plan. So we have tried quite hard, as you say, or at least the applicant has, to try and incorporate some form of soft landscaping, because this is a fairly narrow strip of land to accommodate something that is reasonably large, nearly 6 metres wide if you consider the enclosure. Trying to fit everything in, an access door. So really the only space for some form of landscaping is to the rear facing the cycle path. Now there's only a gap of 0.5 metre, half a metre, so it's not a considerable amount of space. It's probably the minimum you would consider for something meaningful. I think something like climbing planting perhaps is possible, and if there was a motion to approve the application and it was successful, we would look to implement some form of soft landscaping condition that just secures details of what that will be. I don't know whether you can secure climbing planting on an acoustic fence, because it has to be, you have your bottom bit and they fit really tightly together, otherwise they don't work. So we wouldn't want to perhaps put something on there that makes it not work in the future. But it's something that could be explored by condition, I think is what I'd say. Regarding one final point, and I'll stop talking, is construct. So I think it was Councillor Whittam who mentioned it about the construction of the box. I've done quite a bit of late night reading into what these are, and as far as I can tell, not that I could sit here and give you exact figures, is that the benefits over that life cycle do exceed the carbon cost of manufacturing it. But as I say, I couldn't sit here and specifically give you a figure to answer that. Hopefully I've answered everything.
Thank you, James. Right, Councillor Thorndyke, please.
Chair, I noticed the fire service are quite happy if they can drive an engine somewhere near it, and providing people take reasonable precautions in building these things, But should there be a fire with that place, then one of the major arteries out of the town is going to be closed, and closed for some time, because these things burn for a period. They don't go out in 5 minutes. So that is a concern. Why put it near a road where you're likely to cause future problems with a fire and with a fire truck or two stuck on the highway? Why is it there? It's probably there because it's Suffolk County Council land. But it does bring up a new point with this, because several people have muttered about it's in the wrong place. It is. We're building housing developments all over the place. It's a low voltage powered device. So therefore, we should be logically thinking that the housing estates we're building, we're putting this near the substations which inevitably appear on every housing development. Seems a logical place to do it. Yes, you might have to allocate a bit more space to it, and you might have to make sure somewhere nearby you can park a fire engine. But logic to me says it goes on a housing estate near a substation, kill two birds with one stone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorndyke. Councillor Neil again, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just got a question about the life expectancy of the batteries. We're talking about this facility being in use for 30 years. Do those batteries last 30 years, or have they got to be decommissioned? Because if we're talking about decommission, then the batteries and replacing them with other batteries, then that has an environmental impact, quite a large one, in fact. So I just wondered what the life expectancy of the batteries is in this facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. There's no other members at the moment wishing to speak. I'm just going to come back to Councillor Smith and Councillor Miller-Jones, because the only note I've got at the moment is visual impact is something that you disagree with the officer's assessment. Having heard the debate, is there anything else you would want to add? You don't have to, but it's just a question.
I'm not particularly bothered about the visual impact, but if it can be improved, then that can only be a good thing. I would say that if you're standing at the bus stop looking at this, you're going to miss your bus because you're looking the wrong way.
Can we just summarise what the three reasons were? Yeah. So just to put that in sort of planning speak, what I was getting from your points was first of all that you were giving more weight, perhaps than officers were, to those benefits. And then in relation to the visual impact, obviously we felt that it was an unacceptable visual impact and hence it conflicts with our policies. But to you, whilst there is an impact, you don't consider it to be unacceptable and therefore doesn't attract the same conflict with those policies that were quoted in our reason for refusal.
Oh, Councillor Miller-Jones.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I just wanted to confirm with Councillor Smith that he agrees with what I had said about a condition about the root protection. And perhaps we could also add a condition that was discussed before about sort of investigating planting and perhaps sort of, some falling plants. I don't think anyone's listening.
Potentially going to take the hedges out, aren't they?
Yes, that stimulated some conversation in both my left side and my right side. And I think Penny's going to respond to that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in terms of if we went for a recommendation that was contrary to your officers and whether or not we would need to invoke the risk assessment protocol, I think in terms of the actual decision and the recommendation, it is one where there is a balance to be made and it is about apportioning weight to conflict with policies or with the benefits. However, I think there are a number of conditions that we would want to make sure are worded appropriately. So it may be that we need to either go through the risk assessment protocol for that, for them to be worded up to come back to members, or alternatively, I think we have the ability to delegate those to be worded up and with the agreement of the chair and vice chairs. I've made a note of the ones that I think would be relevant, but I think we would want the time and space to be able to word those appropriately should that be the outcome of any vote.
Thank you, Penny. Just for clarification then, Penny outlined the reasons for your wanting to approve. Comfortable? The only thing is, I'm not sure about what we're saying about root protection and planters. I mean, is that stuff that could come back?
I think that what I've picked up is that yes, there are a number of conditions. So the things that I'd noted down, obviously the standard things like times, plans, a planting condition generally, soft landscaping. I think James's point about it not being overly specific and that it is the normal soft landscaping, and then we look at the art of the possible is better rather than a very specific planting condition to which we don't know the technical constraints of. There are a number of conditions that were recommended by consultees, which were set out in the report. So the ecologist recommended, and also our public, private sector housing, environmental health officers recommended a number of conditions in the report also. But I think in order to word those up appropriately and include things like the arbor protection for the existing hedge, it would be better for officers to do that and then come back with the agreement of the chair and vice chairs, if that's where we are.
Thanks, Benny. Councillor Whittam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to pick up on something that Councillor Andy Neal has said. Over the life of the system at 30, well, if you work it out, 31 years, the life of these batteries generally is around 5 to 8 years, effective life. That certainly is in the case in vehicles. There is currently no economic method, viable method of recycling these batteries effectively. In other words, they are just rubbish at the end of the time, detritus to be got rid of. So if you're looking at a 30, 31 year life cycle, you can reckon that there will be 4 sets of batteries go through that unit. So I still come back to this saving over. Yes, West Suffolk needs to be very conscious about saving carbon and meeting requirements for carbon neutral, but we ain't going to do it with lithium-ion batteries. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Whittam, and point is well made. Right, I'm going to go now to test the committee's position on this, because it's important, I think, that we try and underline where we are. Now, with the... What we've got here is a proposal for approval, which is contrary to the officer's recommendation of refusal by Councillor David Smith, and that was seconded by Councillor Miller-Jones. And I think I'm pretty clear now where we are with your suggestions, Councillor, as long as you're comfortable. In terms of the research that officers will do post-committee, if this is actually approved, that will be subject to myself and Councillor London and Whittam as chair and vice chairs with your agreement. So, could I see a show of hands in favour of approval, which is contrary to the officer's recommendation for refusal, please? And those against, please? Thank you, committee. It's come down to a decision, I think. Did you want to announce the vote formally, actually, Claire?
So that's 8 votes in favour and 8 votes against, so it will come down to the chair's casting vote.
And I am not going to change my vote against the proposal, all right? So that as far as the chair's casting vote, it is for refusal of the application in line with the officer's recommendation. No. Sorry? But it means the motion falls. Oh, so the motion falls. Sorry, yes, yeah. The motion falls, yeah. But we're going to get to the situation. Yes, so the motion's lost.
So that motion is lost.
As is the chairman. Now, right, so so approval has failed. So we need another proposal. Councillor Mulmay-White, yeah.
Refusal of this application in line with the officer's recommendation.
And Councillor Whittam seconds that. Does anyone wish to speak? Right, can we see a show of hands? As proposed by, Councillor Neal. Oh, sorry. No. No, I've got to formally propose the proposal to the committee. So the proposal now is for refusal in line with the officer's recommendation as proposed by Councillor Marmae-White and seconded by Councillor Whittam. Could I see a show in hands in favour of refusal? And those against, please?
So that is 9 votes in favour and 7 votes against. The motion is carried. The application is refused in line with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Claire. Yes.
Do we need a break? Councillor Holder's leaving the chair.
Yes, but
He's not going to declare.
just going to, okay. Okay. Does anybody want a comfort break before we move on to the next item, which is? Okay. Where are we now? 10 minutes again. We'll reconvene. We're now on agenda item 7, which is the final agenda item for today, which is the Suffolk Business Park extension on behalf of Green King. Peter is the presenting case officer, so you begin when you're ready, Peter.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Today's application is for a new brewery on the Suffolk Business Park extension, and the applicant is Green King. My proposal today covers a number of bits. I'll first go through what the proposal involves in terms of the relocation of elements of the current Green King site context and photos, policy position, details of the proposal, impact on the highway network, car parking, and then landscaping, biodiversity matters, economic impact. I have a number of an amended condition and a new condition to talk to you about, and then a planning balance and recommendation. So, the proposed new brewery is on the Suffolk Business Park extension. The promoters of that site have called it the Suffolk Park, and you can see it here. If we zoom in, it's just south of the leisure centre and to the west of the Ruffham Tower and radar rooms. I've marked on here an existing warehouse that Green King operate, known as Hen House, and as you'll see in my next slide, there is an existing and new warehouse that Green King have recently taken over. You can see here the proposal site. To the north here is what was originally known as the Eastern Relief Road and is now known as the Ruffham Tower Avenue, and the development would be served on Fortress Way, which loops its way round here. This slide shows where the current brewery is in Bury St Edmunds, if you didn't know, and its relationship to the proposal. And this is an aerial view of the red outline of the planning application site, and its relationship is shown there to that existing warehouse that Green King have recently started operating from. So turning to some photos, this is the existing access on Fortress Way, which is proposed to be amended. I've then taken this photo from Ruffham Tower Avenue. Just to the left that you can't see there would be the car park for the leisure centre and the secondary school, and in the background is some existing warehousing. And then as part of the amendments to the access, this existing cycle way is to be amended as well. So the policy context, well, the application is before you today because your officers are recommending approval contrary to the development plan. So the Suffolk Business Park extension is allocated for what we used to call B1 uses, now known as EG, and B8 uses, so storage and distribution. And the proposed brewery is a B2 use, a general industrial use. So here are the details of the amended access. So you saw that access in the photo, and it's the exiting, the bell mouth of the access is to be made wider to allow for large vehicles to exit. So turning to the proposal itself, it involves a building where the brewery would take place from here, and I'm outlining that here. It would include the provision of 70 car parking spaces, a new pedestrian and cycle access and cycle storage in this location here, and then a yard area here with some silos. There'd be a gatehouse here, and this is where vehicles, both staff car parking and vehicles for the industrial process would come in from this access here. And then there's a substation here. So turning to the elevations to the north, or the top elevation here is the northern elevation, which is viewed from the leisure centre or the secondary school from the Ruffham Tower Avenue. And then the eastern elevation is shown there. and then at the west and the southern elevation. So I thought today it would be helpful to just reiterate what the traffic movements are for the existing brewery in the centre of town, and then I'll take you through what the highway movements would be for the proposal. So as you can see here, this is the existing brewery, and obviously it's quite a unique situation because it has adopted highway going through an existing factory use, which is a product of the fact that it's been there for several hundred years. And vehicles are either coming off junction 43 or 44, and then most commonly they are entering the site off Culham Road, and then if that Culham Road entrance is unavailable through periods of excessive water or high rainfall, they are going down Southgate Street to Main Water Lane, and then there's an entrance off Main Water Lane. And then, as a matter of course, there are HGV vehicles servicing other parts of the site, and that's off Westgate Street or Crown Street. And then, so the existing operation, as there's two warehouses on the Suffolk Park or the Moreton Hall estate. They are travelling from Culham Road through Rougham Hill, through Junction 44 up Bedingfield Way, and that's because their site is now separated. Their warehousing. That's how they're moving their stock around with HGV vehicles. So the new brewery proposal would link in with the existing warehouse to make one site, and then they would have their existing hen house warehouse here. So there would be a reduction in vehicle movements and an efficiency for Greene King as a business. During the pre-application engagement that Greene King undertook, and during the planning process, residents have asked for the local planning authority to condition that Greene King use junction 45 to access the A14. And indeed, Greene King have invited the local planning authority to attach a condition to any permission requiring them to do so. However, as I've said in the report, unfortunately that doesn't meet the tests, and so that's not something that we would be able to do, and we've conveyed that to Greene King, who have said that it's their intention to still instruct their own drivers and the drivers of people that will bring and take goods to and from their site to use junction 45 when going to and from the A14. So, car parking. Officers are aware that there is locally on the Moreton Hall area, there are concerns about previous businesses having inadequate car parking, and we've worked extensively throughout the life of the planning process of the application with Greene King to investigate this, and I've worked with Peter Bradfield from Suffolk County Council as well. Particularly, a number of concerns have been voiced to officers over the Christmas and other periods about the post office depot. You may have heard this yourselves. Officers have looked into this matter, and whilst there is probably an extra demand over the Christmas period, having had some discussions with Royal Mail, officers are aware that there's some operational changes that have occurred on that site, and the council are seeking to engage with the post office to see what solutions could be found to their specific issues. The application, though, turning to the application for Greene King, their proposal before you today includes the proposal of 70 car parking spaces that I'm indicating in this location. For the size of the brewery that they are wanting to bring forward, that represents, as I say in my report, a provision of 43% in accordance with the car parking standards, which officers felt was too low. During discussions, we were invited to look at the site as a whole, so to include the car parking that serves the existing distribution centre, and so combine the warehouse floor area with the proposed brewery and then look at the 2 car parking areas. So if we do that, the car parking that's being proposed and the existing car parking would be a 68% provision in accordance with the car parking standards. Officers were nervous about such a low provision of parking, and I think I was more nervous given the backdrop of some of the issues that have arisen historically on the Moreton Hall area. And we conveyed and worked with Greene King, who have come up with a suggestion of potentially 50 additional car parking spaces, which would be located in this area here. And there is a condition within the report that would talk about monitoring that and then implementing that additional car parking if the need arose over a period of time. So turning to landscaping and B&G, during the lifetime of the application, the main change from landscaping has been the amendment of the scheme so that the 10-metre buffer wide of landscaping around the outside of the site runs all the way around. There was originally a gap between the site and the roundabout, and there was a small gap here, so that's been filled in. And the biodiversity net gain habitat plan has been amended to reflect that. And to ensure that there is sufficient biodiversity net gain from the site if the car park, the additional 50 car parking spaces come forward. The details before the council demonstrate that there would be in excess, just over 10% of biodiversity net gain. If that additional car parking didn't come forward, it would be in the region of 14%. So in weighing up the application, officers have sought to understand what all the issues are, as you would expect, and we are required to understand what the economic impacts are. I've highlighted 6 bullet points here, but these are already within your report, talking about the economic benefits that would come from the proposal. There is the construction cost of the scheme itself, safeguarding jobs, which are well paid in many cases, and also relates to the reputation and association that Bury St Edmunds as a town benefits from having Greene King in the town. I was speaking to you earlier about amended conditions and the car parking, and so I'd like to, we're seeking an amendment to condition 5 with the addition of the wording that's underlined and made bold here, so that that car parking that would be proposed and delivered before the development is first brought into operation, the 70 car parking spaces, they are retained for staff and visitor. And we'd also like to attach a condition, and we've discussed this with Greene King, who are accepting of this, to restrict brewery tours. So currently, many of you may have been, like I have myself, gone on the brewery tour. If we don't attach that condition, Greene King would be able to do those tours if they felt that they wanted to do that in the future. That would obviously have an impact on car parking spaces. So we're attaching that condition so we can control that situation. So to conclude, officers are recommending approval of the scheme, having weighed up the disbenefits and the benefits. And this slide here shows the planning balance, which is set out in the report. The identified harm is that technical planning issue where the local plan doesn't allocate the Suffolk Business Park extension for B2 uses. But on balance, officers are satisfied that along with the public benefits, the economic benefits, and those other elements which are neutral, the necessary landscaping, good design of the scheme and layout, that the scheme on balance is acceptable. And I recommend to you that the scheme be approved. Many thanks.
Thank you, Peter. We have one registered speaker, that's Matt Starbuck, and you are the Managing Director of Brewing and Brands for Greene King. You've been sitting around here for most of the morning. You've got 3 minutes, Matt, and we'll wait to hear what you've got to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. I did have good morning written into my script here, but now we're into the afternoon. So I'm Matt Starbuck. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of Greene King as Managing Director for Brewing and Brands. We're pleased to be bringing forward proposals for a major commitment to deliver a new state-of-the-art brewery at Suffolk Business Park to help ensure the future of our brewing operations in Bury St Edmunds. As a company, we've been brewing in the town for over 200 years and we're very passionate about our craft. The development of a new modern facility will enable us to retain our presence and rich brewing heritage connected with the town, evolving it for generations to come. In the past year, there's been a significant period for us as a company in the town, highlighted by the opening of our new distribution centre at Suffolk Business Park and engaging with local stakeholders and community members to shape the proposals for the new brewery site. The need for a new brewery has become increasingly apparent in recent years as the historic nature and constraints of the Westgate Brewery and its town centre location have made it progressively more difficult to adapt to evolving demands, integrate modern brewing processes and meet our sustainability goals. Suffolk Business Park is a designated employment site that presents an ideal location to allow us to remain within the town and continue to support local employment opportunities. Co-locating the new brewery with our existing distribution centre will enable integration between the two facilities and reduce the level of HGV traffic within the town. Our brewery is an important part of our business and the proposed new purpose-built facility will integrate modern infrastructure to optimise operations and meet evolving consumer demands. The new facility will significantly improve water and energy efficiency, reducing water usage by 50% per pint and aligning with our near-term emissions targets. During the pre-application process, we've engaged extensively with officers, members, local stakeholders and the community to shape the final design, ensuring it reflected their feedback and priorities. We recognise the business park's proximity to Morton Hall and have engaged with residents and community representatives to address concerns about operations in the road network. HGV drivers will access the site via junction 45 of the A14, avoiding HGV traffic on residential roads. We will mandate this to our drivers and take disciplinary action if this is not adhered to. To address parking concerns on nearby streets, we've revised plans to include space for future parking provision, should it be required, which Greene King will monitor and manage. Further provision to support active travel has been integrated into the design, including cycle spaces, changing facilities and lockers to encourage staff to use nearby off-road cycleways and public transport. Importantly, we remain committed to ongoing and regular communication with our team members and the local community going forward, recognising our role and responsibility to the town, which we've been proud to call our home for over 2 centuries. In summary, we believe that Suffolk Business Park is a sustainable and appropriate location for our new brewery. The delivery of the new state-of-the-art facility will enable us to adapt to changing consumer demands, meet our sustainability goals and ensure the long-term viability of brewing operations for the future. Thank you for your time and we hope you can support our application this afternoon.
Thank you very much indeed, Matt. Members, right. Councillor Neil, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll support the application, but I've got some areas of concern. It's mentioned in the papers on more than one occasion about the solar panels being part of the initial build, and I think it's very important. We need to have a policy going forward, from this point forward, if we could, to all new builds have solar panels installed on them. We keep taking farmland out of use for solar panels, and we've got, this is going to be a big warehouse. There's a big warehouse there, the big new building, and part of that build should be solar panels. They may well have plans for them to be introduced at a later date, but why not right at the beginning? So that's something I think we need to take on board. You spoke a lot about the parking places. What is the ratio of parking places that's going to be allocated to disability? That concerns me. And how close will those disability parking places be to the main entrance? West Suffolk, when they built the hub, they didn't consider how close those allocated disability places would be to the front door. And that's something they're going to have to modify because you imagine someone who uses a wheelchair, they've got a hell of a distance to go. And I hope there's something that's been considered in the allocation of the parking places here. In the building itself, the assumption is, going by the pictures, that there's office space upstairs. So can it be confirmed that there's going to be a lift within the building to those office spaces? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Councillor Whittam, please.
I would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation for approval on this application.
Thank you, Councillor Whittam. Is that seconded? Councillor, I think Councillor Malmay White just beat you to that, Councillor Glossop, because I know you get quite disturbed if I don't ask you. Would you like to speak? You are down to speak, actually, Councillor Malmay White, so...
Thank you, Chairman. This building actually just falls within Ruffham Parish. And we're very excited actually to have Green King as part of Ruffham, and maybe on their lorries, although they say Bury St Edmunds, which I think is great because they're promoting Bury. Perhaps should have a little word Ruffham underneath. Anyway, I have to commend Green King on their community involvement. They have gone beyond what is required to involve the parish council and members of the community in their plans. And as I say, we are very excited about this. It is a huge change for Ruffham, but the junction at 45 off the A14 is bringing big changes to the parish. And this is part and parcel of that. And some people would call it progress, some would call it economic development and growth. The fact that it is the other side of the main road from the main village is good because it doesn't really impact on the lives of many people in the village. I'm delighted that Green King are proposing that they will be using junction 45 because we all know the problems with traffic in the town. Now, I've sat as a councillor for so long that I was part and parcel of the decision on the Cullum Road road that went through, and all the controversy over that with the flooding that does take place occasionally there. So I've come full circle now to see Ruffham being part and parcel of a new development of Green King. The Parish Council did have a few comments, and I absolutely agree with Councillor Neal. Thank you. We were surprised that there's provision for solar panels to go on post building rather than at the same time. Given the investment that this the monetary investment that's being made into this building, I would have thought that solar panels at the same time were an infinitesimal part and parcel of the build. So I am surprised that they're not being included as the building goes up. The other thing the Parish Council were querying was we didn't actually see a travel plan. And I was surprised that a development like this wouldn't have a travel plan. And we wondered whether Green King would consider contribution towards bus services. I note that you're making a decision not to allow brewery tours, but I hope this will perhaps come in the future when things have settled down, because I do think it's an important part of our tourism offer that the brewery does have tours to show how they're working, and also, taking students from the college round to see what sort of jobs are available and that kind of thing. So I hope that will come in the future. But I can only reiterate what the Chamber of Commerce have said, that this planning application is really important for the town of Bury St Edmunds and the Suffolk economy as a whole, and we request that this application is given the highest possible priority and is determined in a timely fashion, with everything being done to make sure statutory consultees are made aware of the significance of the application, etc., etc. I absolutely endorse those comments, and I thank everybody who's been involved. I know Pete, his heart and soul has gone into Suffolk Business Park, really, and this is just another feather in his cap, really, to deliver this. So thank you for that, and thank you for Green King for all they're doing for the town. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Malmay White. Councillor Glossop, please.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very pleased about this application and I fully support it. And I think we're very lucky to have Green King wanting to do this and spending all this money for the economic development, which is wonderful. And if you think what's happening across the country, there are places where they'd be biting their arm off to have Green King. So we're so lucky. But what I do want to know is, because they've been with us over 200 years, are they sure that what they're building now will be big enough for them for the next 200 years, or do they need to be securing more land up there for the future? And are they envisaging having more apprenticeships now they'll have a state-of-the-art building? So if I could have those answered, please. Thank you very much.
Well, we can go back to Peter, who may be able to answer some of those questions. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair, through you, and thank you, members, for these questions. So I will try and go through them, and I hope my notes don't let me down. So solar panels, I'll start with that, Councillor Neil. So I think it was probably fair to say that this is a really big move for Green King, and they've been focusing their building on getting right for the brewing process. And they've made sure that they've future-proofed their building so that they can put solar panels on in the future. From my perspective as one of your planning officers, there are no local or national planning policies that would require me or would allow me to make Green King or any other developer put solar panels on at this point in time. We do have policies on BREEAM, and with or without solar panels, they are committing to delivering the new building as having a BREEAM excellent rating. So it is they're coming from a place of wanting to be more efficient, both from an energy perspective and a water perspective, as planning policy is at the moment, nationally and locally, requiring solar panels to be installed at this stage is not something that I think we would be able to require. In terms of disabled parking, there are 4 spaces. During the planning process, Peter and myself looked quite in detail at these, and those disabled parking spaces were slightly amended to give them a greater amount of space around them. Those 4 spaces accord with the 5% of car parkings, the ratio, 5% of spaces should be disabled parking in accordance with the parking standards, so they meet the standards that are set by Suffolk County Council. In terms of whether the building has a lift, I am somewhat embarrassed to tell you I can't remember off the top of my head, and I don't have the plans before me. But of course, internal layout and things like a lift will be dictated to by building regulations, and in particular Part M. And I'll go so far as to say I'd be surprised whether a modern building like that wouldn't have a lift, but I can't give you absolute assurances. In terms of a travel plan, I cover that in paragraph 68 of my report. Travel plans, as I'm told by my highway colleagues at Suffolk County Council, are more readily used in terms of existing businesses and where there are existing problems and they're trying to increase the amount of staff that might sustainably travel to a site. We took the decision at the beginning of the Suffolk Business Park extension that travel plans wouldn't be attached to any of the permissions. So whenever I've sat in front of you here before, travel plans aren't something that we've been attaching because of trying to promote walking and cycling. In terms of the brewery tours, I met yesterday with Green King, and I was told that it may be the case, we obviously don't know what's going to happen with the current site, but it may be the case that they may carry on in their current location. And it may be the case that they come back to the local planning authority in the fullness of time and say, we do want to do brewery tours, and they want to look at that condition and vary that condition. And we'll have a look at who they want to do and serve those, because it could be educational purposes, or it might be just open to the general public, how they travel there and what the parking provision is like. So brewery tours might be something that remain in the town centre or might carry on here, but for now they're not part of this proposal. I've I've got a note here about apprenticeships, and I know that Councillor Glossop made that point. Yes, apprenticeships are something that Green King have said that they will carry on doing as a company. So that's very positive, and I'm sure there's going to be brewing staff and engineering staff, and I'm sure they'll keep doing those. Let me just speak to my colleague because I'm not sure. Oh, yes. So I know Green King, for having worked with them now for the best part of a year, have put an awful lot of work, time and effort into the proposal that's before us today, and they've done a lot of forward planning to make sure that the building that they're putting forward and seeking consent for is going to serve them as a company going forward for many, many decades to come. So they have given that thought to the proposal.
Thank you, Peter. No members are indicating they wish to speak, so I'm going to go straight into proposing the proposal, which was by Councillor Whittam, and it was seconded by Councillor Mildmay White, for approval in line with the officer's recommendation for approval. Could I see a show of hands in favour of that approval, please?
So that appears to be unanimous. The motion is carried and the application is approved.
Thank you, committee. Thank you very much indeed. And the meeting is closed. Oh, sorry. Did you want a comfort break, Councillor Glossop? Oh, yes. Yes. He's always welcome, as we know. Yes, he is. But yes, I was getting to that point as the chair, just to say thank you, Peter. But she's always one step ahead of me, as Councillor Glossop. Right, okay, that's fine. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.